Emma and Charlie fall for each other fast and decide to get married, and everything between them feels absolutely perfect. 1 week before the wedding, everything collapses. It happens the night Charlie introduces Emma to his best friend Mike and Mike's wife Rachel during what starts as a completely ordinary evening. The four of them decide to play a confession game where each person must reveal the single worst thing they have ever done in their life. At first, the whole thing feels lighthearted and playful until Emma's turn arrives and her answer detonates like a bomb and permanently shatters the image Charlie had built of her. The man who believed he knew her completely and had finally found his life partner suddenly realizes he is staring at a stranger. He begins asking himself whether he can still go through with the wedding after what he just heard. The story rewinds to where it all began. Charlie walks into a cafe, and a girl sitting alone reading a book immediately pulls his attention. He has zero experience making the first move, so he waits for her to get up to collect her order and photographs the cover of her book. The title pulls him in even deeper, and he quickly reads enough about it to seem credible. He then walks straight up to her and tells her he absolutely loves that book and launches into how much it means to him. She does not even glance up or acknowledge him. He retreats in embarrassment, but then turns back and apologizes for bothering her and makes it clear he had no intention of coming on to her. That apology is what finally makes her pull out her earphone, and she tells him she has a hearing problem in her right ear and could not hear a single word he said. Without thinking, he lights up with excitement, and she gives him a second chance to say everything again properly. Charlie later recounts that very first meeting to Mike while the two of them are sitting together preparing for the upcoming wedding, and Mike is helping Charlie write his wedding vows. Charlie uses the vow writing as an excuse to pour out every detail about Emma, including things that drive him slightly crazy like her laugh, which he describes as completely unique but genuinely grating. And he somehow ends up writing even that part into the actual vows. Mike tells him to cut it, but Charlie keeps going. He tells Mike that Emma has this extraordinary ability to take any problem or anything bothering him and find a way to make it funny and dissolve the tension entirely. Meanwhile, Emma is sitting with Rachel and Mike's wife to work through the wedding details, and she opens up about her history with Charlie and stuns them both by revealing that Charlie is her first real relationship. They are floored because she is 30 years old. Emma explains that she was deeply insecure growing up and no one ever showed interest in her. Charlie then tells Mike about the first time he proposed to Emma. He leaned close to her deaf ear and quietly confessed that he loved her and could not picture life without her and wanted to marry her. He never had the courage to say it loud enough. She heard nothing. 1 week before the wedding, they are both in a dance lesson with a professional choreographer preparing their first dance. Emma finds the planned routine far too rigid and switches it to a different song that feels more natural to them. The instructor is clearly irritated by Emma's spontaneity. Walking out, Emma vents to Charlie about how tense and humorless the instructor is. Suddenly, they both spot Paulin, their wedding music coordinator, behaving erratically outside. Later at the hotel, they join Mike and Rachel to finalize the catering details and bring up Paulin's behavior. Everyone agrees something needs to be addressed, but Emma pushes back and argues that it is a matter of personal freedom and points out that the wedding is almost here anyway. After locking in all the food arrangements, the four of them decide to extend the night and celebrate with drinks. Emma floats a wild idea and gets Charlie to agree that right after the wedding ceremony, the two of them will sneak off to their favorite restaurant and eat there exactly the way award winners treat themselves after a big night. Charlie is not particularly enthusiastic, but goes along with it. The conversation circles back to Paulin, and Emma notices that Mike is being unusually harsh in his judgment of her and calls him out by asking how he can be so righteous when none of them are innocent. That single observation plants the seed for the confession game. Rachel pushes Mike to share the dog's story, and after some resistance, Mike agrees on one condition, which is that everyone else has to answer the same question and reveal the worst thing they have ever done. They all agree. Mike tells them that back in college, he was walking with his girlfriend on her birthday when a stray dog lunged at her and bit her, and instead of stepping in to protect her, he froze and let it happen, and has never been able to forgive himself for it. Rachel goes next and hesitates at first but opens up. She tells them that when she was a child, a boy who lived nearby and had special needs used to come over to play. One day he led her somewhere unfamiliar, and she felt uncomfortable, so she spotted a closet nearby and tricked him into going inside and then locked the door and walked away and left him there alone. She went home and told no one. When his father came looking for her, she lied and said she had never seen him that day. The next morning she woke up to find police searching everywhere, and they eventually found him after he had spent an entire night locked alone in that remote place. The group is visibly shaken and asks whether he was okay. Rachel simply confirms he survived and was unharmed. Emma is visibly unsettled by Rachel's reaction to her own story, but does not judge her out loud. Charlie's turn arrives next, and he confesses that the worst thing he ever did was cyberbully a classmate in school so relentlessly and so cruelly that the boy ended up leaving the school entirely along with his family and cutting off all contact with everyone. Emma listens to every word and stays completely silent and passes no judgment. Then the table turns to her. Everyone assumes Charlie must already know her secret, but Charlie tells them he is genuinely excited to find out. Emma confesses a secret so shocking that none of them could have ever anticipated it. When she was 15 years old and in high school, she had been planning a mass shooting at her school. Charlie immediately laughs and assumes she is joking. Emma continues with complete seriousness. She tells them she was 15 and in a deeply dark place suffering from severe depression, and in that state she took her father's rifle and began secretly training alone in the woods to prepare for the attack. During one of those training sessions, the gun accidentally discharged and the shot passed dangerously close to her ear and caused internal bleeding that permanently destroyed her hearing in that ear. Charlie is blindsided because she had led him to believe she was born that way, and he realizes she has been hiding all of this from him. Emma then tells them she never went through with it, and she knows it was a horrifying idea, but it was where her mind went at that time. She assumed that just as she listened to their secrets without judgment, they would receive hers the same way. The reaction is the exact opposite. Rachel immediately erupts and turns on Emma and tells her that her cousin is in a wheelchair because of a mass shooting. Charlie had held on until the very last second, desperately hoping Emma would crack a smile and reveal she was drunk and making it all up. The moment it registers that every word is real, his entire perception of her shifts, and he cannot process what he has just heard. Emma is overcome with shame and blames herself for sharing something like this, and apologizes to everyone and tries to explain that she was a child who lacked the maturity to think clearly. But the evening completely unravels because of Rachel's fury, and Rachel tells her that being young does not give anyone the right to think something that monstrous. Mike and Charlie try to calm Rachel down, and Emma attempts to explain that she was clinically depressed and not thinking rationally. But by that point, everyone in the room has already passed their verdict simply on the basis that she considered it. And not one person stops to ask what was happening in the life of a young girl that brought her to that edge. On the ride home, Emma apologizes to Charlie for ruining the entire evening, but he refuses to even engage with her and uses her being drunk as an excuse to delay the conversation. The next day, he sits alone under enormous psychological pressure, torn between the instinct to take a definitive stance on the relationship and the impulse to force himself to move past it and act as if nothing happened. But the conflict inside him never quiets, and every time he tries to push the memory away, it crashes back into his mind until by pure chance his eyes land on a photo of Emma as a teenager. She has been hiding it from him because she cannot stand looking at herself from the period when she despised everything about who she was. That same day, Charlie goes to Mike and tells him everything about the night before. Mike is blunt and tells him this is not the woman Charlie fell in love with at first sight. And with only days left before the wedding and family already traveling in and enormous amounts of money, already committed to the entire event, Mike tells him none of that matters and that he absolutely cannot marry someone like her, and urges Charlie to walk away immediately, and tells him he will report her to the police and support whatever decision Charlie makes. Charlie returns home, and the two of them sit down together to talk calmly. Emma apologizes again for destroying the previous night and asks him directly if he hates her now. He denies it and tells her he simply cannot wrap his mind around the fact that any of this is real. She assures him she would never fabricate something like this just to make conversation. He pushes back and tells her she should never have shared it in front of everyone. She points out that she was drunk and had no intention of it coming out, and asks him to bury the entire night and move forward as if it never happened. Charlie refuses and tells her he needs to understand first what brought her to the point of planning an attack on her own school. She struggles to answer and asks to postpone the conversation, because there is still so much left to handle with the wedding preparations. When she senses his tension and hesitation, she asks him directly whether he is still committed and still intends to marry her. He reassures her that nothing has changed and tells her that this conversation is more important to him right now than anything else. Emma then opens up and tells him that when she transferred to her new school, she could not form a single friendship, and everyone around her bullied her relentlessly. And over time, she began to hate the school and everything in it, and those dark thoughts consumed her completely. Even after hearing all of that, Charlie is not satisfied and feels it still does not explain how someone arrives at such a terrifying decision. After Emma finishes telling him, they try to push through the rest of the day normally and go together to meet their wedding photographer and sit with her to lock in all the details for the shoot. The photographer keeps walking them through planned shots one by one and repeatedly uses the word shoot, without realizing that every single time she says it, the word detonates something inside Charlie, and sends his mind straight back to the image of Emma holding a rifle. The photographer notices the tension between them and remarks that they do not look at all like an excited couple with only days until their wedding. She takes them through a practice session to loosen them up. Charlie tries his hardest to perform happiness and project that everything is fine, but the reality is that the connection between them has corroded completely. He cannot shake the image of her standing beside him while holding a weapon, and he feels that accepting her as she is means accepting violence itself, and that leaves him deeply unsettled. From that point on, he begins watching her, constantly studying her past through the lens of this new information, and scrutinizing every sharp reaction she has ever had. Eventually, he reopens the conversation, and Emma tells him that she had been on the verge of moving forward with her plan when the very next day news broke of a mass shooting at a nearby mall where multiple people lost their lives. One of those victims was a classmate from her own class. In that moment, she confronted herself for the first time and began to grasp that what she had been planning was not just a passing dark thought, but a real catastrophe capable of destroying countless lives. She snapped out of it and understood that going through a painful period does not give anyone the right to inflict that pain on others. In a twist of bitter irony, her classmates then chose her to be part of an anti-violence campaign and made her their official spokesperson. It was the first time she ever felt genuinely accepted and belonging among them. In that moment, she made the decision to discard the rifle and leave every dark thought behind her for good. From that day forward, she has fought against violence with everything she has. She describes to Charlie what that turning point felt like and how profoundly it transformed her, and tells him it felt like finally waking up from a nightmare that had been living inside her for years. Despite everything Emma has just shared, Charlie coldly asks whether those dark thoughts have ever returned and whether she has ever considered hurting anyone again. Emma assures him they have not and asks him to close this chapter permanently. She confesses her love for him and tells him she does not want him to see her differently. Charlie pulls her into a hug and reassures her that he loves her too. But the truth inside him tells a completely different story because he has already begun rejecting who she is and feeling deceived by her. And that places him at a brutal crossroads between pushing through the psychological weight and continuing the relationship or walking away and demolishing everything they have built. Charlie sits alone reading through the wedding vows he has written for her, and with every line his feelings shift because he once described her as the most empathetic and genuinely kind person he has ever known. He reaches a breaking point and deletes every word of it and erases every beautiful thing he ever wrote about her because he feels he was completely fooled. The moment Emma appears before him, he hides what he was doing and performs the pretense that he was writing the vows and that everything is perfectly fine. Emma is not fooled for a single second and sees clearly that he has changed toward her. She happens to notice his coffee mug with a gun drawn on it sitting in the trash and immediately understands that every display of acceptance he has put on has been a performance, and that the truth is he cannot move past what he heard. Emma walks out of the kitchen holding a cooking utensil, and Charlie recoils in visible fear. Emma notices immediately and asks him why he is looking at her like he is terrified of her. He dismisses it as an involuntary reaction. But Charlie has reached the point where he is genuinely afraid of the woman he planned to marry and is bracing for anything from her at any moment. He initiates a calm conversation and attempts to understand whether a childhood trauma shaped her into who she became and subtly suggests she consider seeing a therapist. Emma reads exactly what he is implying and brushes past his hints entirely and hands him a date to continue finalizing the wedding paperwork. 2 days later, Emma senses the growing distance between them and suggests they restart from zero and rediscover each other the way they did at the beginning. Charlie makes an effort to play along but then tells her it will not work and dismisses the idea. He insists he has moved past the whole thing and is not thinking about it anymore. Emma immediately confronts him and asks why then did he throw the mug in the trash. He lies and tells her it must have been broken. She pushes back and forces him to admit that he cannot get past what he heard and that it is bigger than he is pretending. A call from Rachel cuts the argument short. The next day, Charlie goes to see Mike and Rachel in person and pleads with them to attend the wedding and argues that they cannot pull out at the final hour since they are managing everything. Rachel refuses completely and tells him he should be canceling it himself and demands to know how he can possibly marry someone like Emma. Charlie fires back and reminds Rachel that Emma never actually did anything, while Rachel herself locked a child with special needs alone in a remote place for an entire night, and is the last person who should be judging anyone. He tells them all that thinking something is not a crime or the entire country would be guilty, and that they cannot punish her simply for a thought she never acted on. He is honest with them and admits he was just as shaken as they were, but after she explained how she changed, and what stopped her, he started thinking clearly again. He walks them through what Emma endured as a child and how she witnessed a neighbor die right in front of her, and tells them it is completely natural that something like that leaves a mark. Rachel eventually tells him she will consult her cousin who is in the wheelchair, and if her cousin agrees to attend the wedding, then Rachel will come too, because she cannot make any decision that might hurt her. When Charlie leaves, he encounters Rachel's cousin outside and introduces himself, but immediately discovers that Rachel's relationship with her cousin is far weaker than she implied, and the cousin does not even know who he is or anything Rachel supposedly told her. Charlie still tries to convince her that Emma is a good person, but the cousin becomes uncomfortable and ends the conversation. Charlie is left questioning whether he is truly trying to convince everyone else or simply trying to convince himself. The next day, he sits with his coworker Misha and out of nowhere asks her what the worst thing she has ever done in her life is. At first, she tells him she used to cheat on exams, but he pushes for something bigger. She confesses she cheated on a boyfriend whose only fault was being genuinely kind to her. Charlie then exploits the opening and asks her what she would do if she found out her partner had once planned a school shooting, but pulled back at the last moment. Misha answers immediately that she would call the police without hesitation. Charlie tries to offer justifications and explains that the person changed and that she should love them anyway. Misha holds firm and says that having the intention in the first place means the possibility of repeating it is very real, and that trusting such a person becomes nearly impossible because they deceived her and withheld their true self from the start. Charlie defends the idea further and asks her even if the person told her the full story and genuinely convinced her they had changed, would she still feel the same? Misha tells him that would be the clearest possible red flag, and that even if she loved that person, she would report them because they represent a real danger, and she describes such a person as deeply mentally disturbed. Charlie erupts internally and storms out of there in distress. Shortly after, Misha comes to his office to check on him, and he tells her he is just overwhelmed by the wedding pressure. Without warning, he breaks down completely and starts crying in front of her. She moves toward him and tries to comfort him. In a moment of profound weakness, he misreads the situation and almost betrays Emma with Misha, but snaps back to reality at the last possible second and pulls away and apologizes and begs her never to tell anyone what just happened. Wedding day arrives, and Charlie feels tense immediately because of Misha being there with her partner. Rachel and Mike reverse their decision and show up to stand by Charlie's side, and the evening flows smoothly until Emma's father takes the microphone to give his speech and shares warm and funny stories about Emma's childhood, and mentions proudly that she joined an anti-violence and anti-weapons campaign. He reveals he is a military officer and recalls a strange coincidence when his rifle disappeared one day, and he assumed Emma had thrown it away because of how strongly she opposed weapons. Rachel can barely contain herself from laughing, and Charlie tenses up the moment the subject surfaces. When Rachel's turn comes to give her maid of honor speech, she tells the room that Charlie was the one who introduced them, and she was surprised when Emma asked her to be her maid of honor since she realized Emma had no close friends. Rachel then humiliates Emma further in front of everyone and tells the room that after getting to know her, she found her strange and complicated, but that she deserves someone as open as Charlie and that they genuinely suit each other. Rachel successfully poisons the entire atmosphere of the wedding. Emma quietly slips away and heads to the bathroom, and there she overhears Misha talking to a friend about the planned shooting. Emma immediately assumes Rachel was the one who leaked her secret. She pulls Charlie aside in a fury and tells him what she heard and fears the story reaching their families and ruining the entire wedding. She demands Charlie go speak to Misha to find out who told her. Charlie pleads with her not to escalate it. Emma ignores him and goes to find Misha herself. The moment she approaches them, she finds Charlie and Misha standing together and misreads the situation entirely and assumes Charlie confessed to almost betraying her with Misha. Misha steps forward and clarifies that Charlie was the one who approached her first, and that nothing happened between them and that he was crying and she came close only to comfort him. Emma is floored by Charlie in that moment and presses Misha to tell her everything and asks why he was crying. Charlie scrambles to invent a cover story, but Misha tells Emma that Charlie asked her what she would do if her partner had planned a school shooting. Emma understands in an instant that Charlie is the one who told Misha her secret and not Rachel. She refuses to hear a single excuse from him because in one night he has betrayed her twice. He withheld acceptance and then he exposed her most vulnerable secret, and that is its own form of betrayal. The two of them return to the reception and try to perform normalcy in front of their families and push through the rest of the evening. Charlie's turn comes to give his vows, and he decides to speak from memory and from the heart. He tells the room about the very first moment he saw her and how it felt like a quiet and simple scene straight out of a film. He admits he used the book she was reading as an excuse to get close to her, and that the moment she laughed, he fell completely in love with her. He talks about the sound of her laugh, despite the fact that Mike warned him not to bring it up in the speech, and describes it as completely unique, but at the same time genuinely irritating, and tells them he loves every part of her, including that. He even brings up private details of their relationship and embarrasses her in front of everyone. Then without warning, he starts addressing the crowd directly and declares loudly that she is innocent and has done nothing wrong, but does not explain what he means. He then apologizes to Emma directly for almost betraying her with Misha. The atmosphere ignites immediately, and Misha's partner stands up furiously and charges at Charlie and punches him in front of the entire wedding party, which completely derails the evening. After the wedding, Emma vanishes and Charlie cannot find her anywhere. He thinks back to a conversation they had before and remembers they agreed that after the wedding they would go eat together at their favorite restaurant. He decides to go there hoping she might show up, and tells himself that if she comes, it means she is willing to keep building a life with him. He sits at the restaurant and waits. Emma walks through the door. She treats him as if they are meeting for the very first time. Despite the fact that he once called that idea ridiculous, he agrees to start over and get to know each other again from scratch. The film closes with one important lesson: never get involved with anyone named Misha, because she will betray you.